Today I effed up by asking my dad about the war. I never could join the military. I was DQ'd because I have a documented suicide attempt. 2 of them actually where I flatlined. I've always held my father on a pedestal of what a man should be. Today, just a few hours ago, we were drinking on the Mississippi River bank. I was away for 10-ish years. So now that I live at home again, we try to hang out every week or 2 weeks. I recently learned that the largest ever tank-on-tank battle happened in the Gulf War. My father was in a tank battalion. I did the math. He never ever spoke about it. He's highly decorated. All he had ever told me as a kid that he was in a war and he lived. Today, at 30 years old, my drunk father told me all of the details. He was there. He described victims of chemical attacks. Yeah, it was tank-on-tank warfare, but dude, when a tank goes down the people evacuate. Those that are still living. And he shot them. One of them were coughing and gurgling blood from a shot to the lung, and he just shot him in the head and kept running. It's why he was on foot with small arms in a tank battle. He was drunk. He was crying. He's 51. At the time he was a 19-year-old kid. Jesus peeping Christ. He told me about his friends who had been hurt by chemical weapons. In great detail he told me about eyeballs the size of grapefruits. He told me about all the people he killed. Every one of them. And he was bawling. I held my father today like a crying child. He puked in my lap. That was before he knew I was born. I was born while this was all happening. He didn't know about his son me until 3 months after the conflict. They didn't have internet back then. News of his son had to be sent by boat. Just, Jesus peeping Christ. The things he had to see as a teenager. And I had to hold him like a little kid. I still smell like vomit. Now that he is safely home and asleep I can cry. I'm sobbing as I write this. My poor father should never ever want for anything ever again. And I'll make damn sure he has everything above my own needs from this point forward. TL. Dr. Asked my dad about the war and got puked on and emotionally damaged. Undefined. Dad was a World War II sailor. All he ever told me was a story about shaving with a straight razor on an LSD. I have no idea how I was ever born after that story. And a Chinese restaurant in San Francisco. Mom said he had screaming nightmares for years. The quiet ones were the ones that saw stuff. Give them that. Your dad probably has PTSD. You may be the first person he's ever told. Be proud he trusted you. I have PTSD and I couldn't tell anyone what happened for 40 years. Just listen. Don't judge. The more you retell, the easier it is. The first time is so very hard and painful. Let him heal through retelling. So many World War II vets held so much back. My next door neighbor for 30 years never discussed his time in the army. Until a year before his death. Then he told me about his sniper experience, shooting the enemy and seeing their head explode. PTSD affected civilians too. My mother and most of her family survived Italian and then German occupation. The deprivation, bombings, and executions were pretty horrific even though she glossed over details. She still has terrible dreams, as my father mentioned. Yes, a year or 2 before she died, Mom responded to my telling her about my own experience with a revelation about being scared to death of her own mom. Just a generation that bottled things up. They went through the Depression, War, Cold War. They saw a lot. My dad was in the Army, stationed at the Army base at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. He never really talked about his time in the Army. He told us a couple of stories about the attack but never more than that. He died in 1983 when I was 23. I had an uncle at that base on that day. He only spoke of it once to me and all he said was that he wished he had a gun so he could fight. My dad told us he found a place to wait out the attack and stayed there. He also told us a couple of stories that I won't repeat. Had a great uncle there that left literally 18 hours before the attack. Every year at Christmas he would recite the guys and a few gals that he knew that were killed during the attack, including when he was dying and could barely talk anymore. He still knew it was Christmas and that meant the list. It was so crazy when I got close enough to his lips to hear that he was reciting those names. Great timing for your great uncle. Oh, he died on Mar 2. It was just the last Christmas before the end that I was talking about. I think they meant on the whole leaving Pearl Harbor before it got ambushed thing. That's some solid luck. That comes with the strings of solid survivor's guilt. You did real good looking after him. For what it's worth, he needed someone. And you were there in the way he needed you to be. You should also know if you're struggling to deal with what you helped and supported him through venting, that there are counselors, etc., who specialize in supporting someone who is supporting someone else. Don't be afraid to try to connect to those services either if you're a bit overwhelmed by it. Some people's demons can haunt others, caring for them to varying degrees. Yeah, I know what you're feeling. I was a 12-year-old kid when my uncle, the scariest man I've ever known, cried like a baby on my shoulder because of what he had to do in Vietnam. I'll never forget that the first person he had to kill was a woman because she picked up a gun. War is hell, and anyone that tells you it's glorious has never gone. I had a good buddy crying hysterically because on 3 separate occasions, a person within 5 of him was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. He couldn't understand why he wasn't dead, but they were. Marines and alcohol. It's either going to be the best peeping party you've been to or a reminder of exactly what our country asks peeping 18-year-olds to do. That last sentence is so true. A neighbor of some friends had been to Afghanistan, lost a bunch of his squad in a firefight. He had immense survivor's guilt, and once he got drunk he'd just talk about it and cry. The speepty part is people knew, so once that happened the party was officially over and they started deliberately leaving, kind of forcing the last person standing to be stuck playing therapist for the poor bastard. Turns out not everyone subscribes to It Takes a Village. But then again, they were just trying to have fun and they didn't force anyone to send anyone to war. It was usually me that was left because I didn't have the heart to abandon someone crying. I have PTSD. I won't go further than to say, I'm a US wartime vet and former police officer. Crying is healing. He needed to tell you. I know you're affected by what he poured out to you, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you for bearing that burden and letting him heal just a little. TBH by not telling him to stop once he opened up. You should know, you're the hero here. I've unloaded before on someone who held me while I screamed my heart out for over an hour. Thank you for your sacrifice today. From one damaged soul recognizing the bomb you've given to another damaged soul. My stepdad had PTSD from his time in the Air Force and some incidents he witnessed that he had to help with in vehicle accidents. I wish he'd have confided in me like this. I always tried to be open and let him know that I was there to listen to the horrors he'd seen. He packed his stuff and left my family with no notice a few years ago, and he's not doing great. Reading this post and comments has made me realize I need to reach out to him and make sure he's doing okay. I agree that he'd probably like it if you reached out, but if he's not ready to divulge, don't pry. He probably didn't want to burden you before, so maybe say something ambiguous about being willing to listen if he wanted someone to open up to. If he's ready, and sees that you're willing to listen without reprisal, he'll probably appreciate that opening from you. If he's not ready, be ready to talk about something else, but maybe in the meeting with, anytime you want to chat, just let me know. Yeah, it's been a couple years since we talked. I feel like he thinks I want to kick his ass, so wasn't gonna open up with asking him to open up or anything. Just see how he's doing. Let him know I don't hate him as much as he thinks, but I appreciate the thought. I never wanted to force him to talk to me about uncomfortable topics. I didn't mean to imply you did, and I'm sorry for my bossiness. You'd be surprised how many well-meaning people can actually make things worse by trying to get someone to talk. And they genuinely want to help, and don't understand why I don't want to go there. I was just trying to get that across quickly, so you didn't inadvertently drive him further away by trying to help. You sound like you got a good plan, and I wish you every success in reconnecting with your stepdad. It's cool, I know things can sound harsher than you mean through just text alone. I didn't take any offense from it. Happy to hear other people's opinion on things like this, especially from people who suffer from similar things that can offer insight into how they'd prefer other people to approach the topic. My grandfather was in the tank division during Korea. He never talked about it. I imagine his stories wouldn't have been different. My grandpa was a hard man, but loving. He was a history teacher. He had 5 children with my grandma, a music teacher. He was stubborn, tight with cash, and hilarious as much as he was an asshole. But he never, ever talked about his experience in Korea. It wasn't till he died that I saw any pictures of him in the army. As the old saying goes, war is hell. But it's more than that. The ghost haunts forever. Emo. People who are pro-war are monsters. My grandfather was in Korea too, as a combat engineer. No idea what he did over there. Never spoke a word about it or how he got certain scars. Loved to joke about time in garrison or training, but not a word about the war. Funniest thing, at 18 I learned he and my GMA were liberals, whatever the hell that means anymore. He died right before Florida shut down for COVID last year. He was done. He had his first heart attack at 45. Lived to 83. My grandma redid the kitchen. There are times I wish I'd asked him more, but deep down I know he wouldn't have said much. You guys do know that as direct descendants you can fill out paperwork and get your grandfather's military records right. NARA, National Archives and Records Administration, will have all of it. You can request it. It won't give you the personal stories, but you can get units served in, battles participated in, promotions, awards, training camps attended, etc. Hey man, I don't think you should think of this as a today I effed up moment. A lot of times it's actually therapy for veterans and those with PTSD to talk about their experiences. Maybe you don't realize it, but I'm sure you actually helped him with some of the issues he dealt with by allowing him to vocalize it. Regardless, hope he's doing well. There's a book you may want. The Body Keeps the Score. Best PTSD book I've read. I love this book. I think I've given away a dozen copies. Everybody has said it helps. Oh. I thought I was the only weirdo that gave this book away. I've given away 2 copies so far. Keep rebuying it for myself. And then give it to someone else. Rinse and repeat. Yep. My poor father should never ever want for anything ever again. And I'll make damn sure he has everything above my own needs from this point forward. I have the utmost respect for you and wish you luck in this goal. Seriously. You sir are incredible. I have a buddy who was a gunner, did a couple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. One day he just started talking. I was the one trying to hold back tears listening to his stories. He was 18 for God's sake. Had to shoot so many little kids running at them shooting. Bombs strapped to them. Ect. Then he went on about the cutest little girl running up to the truck in front of him. He had his sights on her the whole time. She was just a little girl looking for candy. Until she blew up his best friends in front of him. Man. Honestly, peep the people who use children to fight their wars. Agreed. Including the people who send 18-year-olds to invade foreign countries. He's lucky to have your love and support. This vet thanks you for being kind to him. I must warn you, secondary trauma is real. You may benefit from some psychotherapy or at least some time chatting with a close friend. The best therapists have therapists, too. It's not just secondary trauma. It's also genetic and generational trauma. A lot of war is hell, and other sentiment in this thread. As a veteran myself, I feel like the supportive talk needs some redirection. If you care about the things that happen to us, if you really support us, stop making new veterans. Oppose war in all of its forms, be it sanctions, nuclear arms, the military-industrial complex, contract mercenaries, the media framing people from other countries as our adversaries, etc.